Welcome, everybody. You guys are starting to pile in. Good morning, good afternoon. Now it's even later than my first session, so maybe even more late afternoon. Happy evening to some of you guys as you're piling in. It's good to see your names on the screen. In case you were wondering, this is the analog audio zone mixing session. We'll wait just a couple of seconds, maybe a minute or so, just to make sure everybody gets in, gets comfortable. I have my second cup of coffee for the day. So we'll settle in and we'll get started here in just a brief couple of moments. But good to see you. Got a couple extra screens in this session. So got a couple of confidence monitors. I may be looking at a few different places, but this will be fun. I'm looking forward to doing this one. All about the GR4. Still got a couple people coming in and stuff. Hope you guys are having a good morning. I saw Nicola's AEC session, and that was very good. And I look forward to hanging out with the rest of the team for the rest of the day. If you guys haven't seen the schedule, go and register for more courses. And we're doing, I believe, a hangout at the end on Thursday after the session. So be sure to check that out as well. Okay. All right. It looks like, let me look at my time. All right. We'll go ahead and get started. So in case this is the first session you're seeing of me, I'm Samantha. I'm a commercial and install audio manager here in the United States. And this is Analog Audio Zone Mixing. And today we're going to be kind of diving into the GR4. And you guys, if you were in my last session, I like to start with a nice little glamour shot. So this is it. The GR4 is this great little analog zone mixing. I'm sure you guys were all in my HM64. This is going to be its analog brother. It's going to be analog brother to HM64. So let's jump in here a little bit. Okay. So some projects require flexibility and security. And for those projects, the GR4 can supply comprehensive zone mixing in a single rack unit space. For contractors, installers, sometimes you just need that cost-effective, comprehensive solution. I see this fitting really well, as it says on the slide here, for stores, cafes, bars, retail centers, even some leisure centers as well. Just fits perfectly in those kinds of scenarios. Okay. So the GR4 at its basics is an 8-in, 4-out mic line mixer. There are alarm and paging inputs. We have our PL remote compatibility, which we will talk about a little bit here later. We have primary and secondary mic modes. We have emergency mic modes, and we have a jukebox mode. And I'll define all of these modes for you in a little bit. And as like an extra little bump of security is that you can actually take the gain and volume rotary controls, pop them off and get them capped so that people can't just walk up and start turning a bunch of things that they shouldn't. So, excuse me. So let's talk about a couple of the key benefits of the GR4. Earlier this year, we implemented new pricing, officially blowing the competitors out of the water. We supply paging and alarm inputs, as I noted, for third-party systems, access to remote controls that even non-technical users can operate. And that's a really big thing overall, is our end users or our clients having access to the AV technology without needing to be AV experts. That's really huge. We wanted to have a couple of front panel mic and 3.5mm or 1/8" inputs for convenience. The ability to remove the gain and rotary controls, as I noted just a couple seconds ago. But above that, and as always, the Allen & Heath audio and build quality is always unmatched. So now I want to actually jump into the unit itself. So on the front panel, we have our mic select, and you can actually pick to use the front or the rear one, the front facing XLR or the Phoenix blocks on the back. And then we've got our mic input level knobs, and we've got our stereo input. There we go, stereo input levels. That's just our peak indicators. we have our zone selections, the 3.5 millimeter jack input for the mobile music input. And then after that, we move to our zone 1 mix, our zone 2 mix, our zone EQs, our zone 3 level, and our zone 4 level, and finally, of course, our power switch. Now, if we flip over to the back of the GR4, we have, of course, our main power. We have our dip switches to change how jukebox mode functions, one to actually lock our zones, another for remote programming, and finally a logic dip switch. And again, I'll go over these more in depth here in a moment. Then we've got an alarm input for third-party triggers, a page input, our remote control jack for those PL14s, and analog zone control connectors for third-party use. Then we have our zone outputs, our 4 stereo inputs, 4 mic inputs, and our mic EQ. And okay, so I've mentioned remotes a few times now, so I kind of like to explore those just a tad. So the PL14 remote is an easily deployable tactile controller. You can mount it on a wall, and it's as easy as running just a simple cat cable from the GR4 directly to the PL14, and you've got power and control. So you can have up to 2 of the PL14s per GR4, but then we've also got the PL5 that can be paired with the PL14 to have mobile control of the system as well. Sometimes people just like having something, maybe they're speaking and they want to have it near them, even though it may be mounted on a wall, or somebody is just moving around and wants to be able to use it. We have the answer for that. So let's walk through this a little bit. So you can see that we've got a source selection indicator on the left, followed by the level indicator of that source. And below, we've got a rotary knob to control the level of the source in the zone, and up and down arrows to tab through the available sources. And then finally, of course, we have that infrared sensor for those PL5 remotes as well. We can actually use these PL14s in a couple of different ways. So one of the options is, as this diagram shows, is we can have set them to have 1 remote per zone, or actually use 1 remote to control both zones. If we go over here, for rooms with air walls or otherwise configurable areas, it can sometimes be advantageous to tell the remotes to either follow or be entirely disabled. So this can cut down on confusion or having to run from one remote to another. So when that air wall kind of comes down, 1 remote may just can be completely disabled or follow the first remote. Everybody loves those air walls. All righty. And you can see there, it's easy, just an easy little switch to decide how you'd like the remote to actually follow or be disabled. All right. So I've mentioned the programs and settings, and I want to kind of dive into those a little bit because there were so many different modes and there were so many different ways to program, and I want to talk more about those. So, all right, first we have the primary mic mode, and this is when music is faded to a preset level when a signal on mic 1 is sensed, or the page contact is closed, and then mic 2 is actually muted. Then we have secondary mic mode, and this is when the music is faded to a preset level, just like with primary mic mode, but this is when mic 2 audio is sensed. Then we have emergency mic mode, and this is going to mean that all zone feeds are muted. So everything being fed to other zones is going to be muted. Mic 1 is fed directly to all the zones, and that's when the alarm contact is activated. So essentially you want it to act like an alarm. So if the alarm is triggered, you want it to go into emergency mode so that nobody is hearing anything except the mic 1 or likely the paging call saying, hey, there's an emergency, things like that. And then we also have what's called jukebox mode. And this is a music priority feed. And this is when audio is sensed on stereo input 3. The current music feed will actually be ducked until that feed resumes again. So it kind of all these different modes for different scenarios based on how you'd like to configure or set up the venue that the GR4 is in. So, okay. If we press and hold the select buttons while we're powering on, The power LED will actually flash continuously, and then you enter into program mode. And gosh, sorry, there's a frog in my throat. We can use the zone 2 select switches to toggle through certain parameters, and the stereo 1 through 4 LEDs indicate the actual value of the parameter, and the mic 1 and mic 3 LEDs indicate the value. So what are the settings? Like, what can we toggle through? So beyond just picking the kinds of mode we want to be in, we can actually say and dictate how we would like all these parameters to function. So the bits that are highlighted in gold are the defaulted values. So if you just turn it on, these will function. But the big parts being, we can change the ducker attenuation. We can change the hold time of that ducker, or even the release time. We can also change the crossfade time, the jukebox attack time, the hold time, and the release time. We can change all these little pieces about it to make sure that when we're utilizing these modes, when we've got jukebox mode running, or when we've got pages coming through, we can say it happens exactly as we want it to. We don't need to worry about, oh, well, this isn't turning on fast enough, or this is holding on way too long. We do have the option to change it. And you'll see as I continue through this presentation, there's a couple of different ways we can kind of dictate. So we've got all the different modes, and now we know that we can change the parameters of those modes as well, but we can change even more beyond that. So flexibility is like my favorite word when it comes to Allen and Heath and all of our install products. It's just, everything is just so flexible. So let's talk about, remember all those dip switches on the back? Now we're going to talk about them. So contact closure dip switches, normally you can change it between normally open and normally closed, again, depending on how your system works or how you'd like it to work, for emergency input detection. On activation, all inputs will fade to the preset level except for mic 1. We talked about that, which will act like the paging microphone, and zone 1 and zone 2's LEDs will flash. But normal operation actually goes back to once the contact is returned to its original state. And let's kind of dig into this a little bit. Ooh, fancy animations. So on this alarm input, again, it's as easy as having the contact closure, which again, we can change between being normally open or it being normally closed. And all of the inputs will fade to a preset level, except for mic 1. The LEDs on the front will flash quickly to let you know that this is started, and we can actually dictate how that changes. So we've got that, the alarm input, and then we've got the page input, which is different than the alarm input. The alarm input is assuming it's an emergency, and the page input is more of a temporary, like I just need to say something. So on activation, again, all inputs will fade to the preset level, and the zone 1 and zone 2's LEDs will flash quickly. So we'll go over here. Here's that jukebox and box mode. So these dip switches can be toggled to change how these parameters function. So, and it's listed on the slide here. You can have the mic level paging detection on the mics 2 through 4 paging detect, and we can change whether zone 1 or zone 2 is in jukebox mode, which means that it can be in different scenarios. You can maybe have zone 1 and jukebox mode and zone 2 running in a completely different scenario. Then we've got our zone lock, because sometimes we just need it to focus on one thing. We don't. This is all, again, for the sake of security and making sure people aren't accidentally doing things they ought not to and things like that. So on the zone lock dip switches on the back, we can change the mic select lock, the music select lock for zones 1 or zone 2. Go to the next dip switches here. There we go. On the remote function, we can change that. We can lock things as necessary. We can say we don't want them to be able to change the volume, so we can lock that, or we can keep them from actually changing the zones at all. And so we can do that in zone 1 and zone 2 as well. Lots of choices here. And then we have our logic dip switch, which means that we can do the invert. This is where we're actually changing whether it is normally open or normally closed for the page and the alarm input. And we can also do phantom power this way, either on mic 1 totally separately, or we can enable it on mics 2 through 4. All right, there's that F word again, that's flexibility. So we want complexity. We want, we've been able to program and change the way that these things function, either with the dip switches or with the programming on the front of the GR4. We can have security by either capping the rotary knobs, or having just them be dip switches on the back so people can't have access to them physically. But beyond that, we wanted it to be able to add maybe even another layer of flexibility, another layer of programming where people cannot have access to things, so that once we set it up, once we have it perfect for the client, I know that I have my fair share of, have you guys ever been to, you set up this beautiful venue, you get everything perfect for them, and then you get a support call like a couple of months down the line, or even maybe a couple of years, and somebody's touched something, or you go do a service call out there and it is completely different. Like they have changed so much. That's what I see the most, is either they haven't touched it in 20 years or they've touched it every other day for 20 years. And there seems to be no middle ground. It's just one of those two options. So this next slide kind of helps us meet that flexibility, that configurability, but keeping it knowing that people cannot adjust it from how we last left it. Okay, so there's a nice screenshot of it. On the inside of the GR4, we have lots of different spaces where we can add jumpers and change how, again, the GR4 kind of operates. And I'll even give a nice little list here. So we've got all these different jumpers we can put in, and it tells you on the very far right-hand side, the state when the jumper is not fitted, aka completely default. But to tell you the kind of things that we can change with these jumpers is we can adjust the high pass filter for mics 1 through 4. We can adjust the gain of the stereo inputs 1 through 4. We can even change the gain of the zones. We can make them mono if we'd like. And we can change the mix of the zone 3 and the zone 4. And here's a nice little shot here for you. And let me talk through these. We've got we've got the high pass filter, those gains. We've got the zone gains, the zone monos, the zone mixes, and then we have this nice little shot here. So depending on where this jumper is placed, we can change the actual mix of zones 3 and zone 4. This is kind of what helps make this such a powerful one unit, single rack space mixer. So as shown here, we can decide how we'd like to feed zone 3 and zone 4, whether it be a copy of zone 1 or zone 2, one specific mic, or one of the stereo inputs. You've got all these possibilities, and I'd really kind of like to dig a little bit in and see how we might actually use the GR4. So here is what a setup might look like if you were using every single connection available on a single GR4. We've got 4 microphones, 2 stereo zones, 2 mono zones, 4 stereo inputs, 2 PL14 controllers, some custom third-party controllers as well, and some paging and alarm logic. So this is a lot of connectivity on a single rack unit. It's perfect, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's perfect for restaurants, bars, retail spaces, classrooms, leisure spaces, things like that, where, again, you want a little bit of security. There may be a high traffic area, or people just like, touching stuff too much. But you still need that power and that flexibility. And you want an analog approach. You may not need all of the HM64. The GR4 is a perfect answer for that. Okay, so here's an example of perhaps a retail space. We have the public address and voice alarm system in the top right, as well as background music and a mic for paging. And we can feed many different zones and speakers and still maintain control with our PL remotes. Look at that. Lots of low voltage active ceiling speakers and 100-volt speakers as well. There we go. Then here's an example of a small office. So we've got multiple computers feeding probably video conferencing audio. And again, we want to make sure we're keeping alarms, background music, and remote control available as well. And finally, we have a bar or a restaurant. And in addition to the paging mics and fire alarms, we've got digital media feeds, TV audio, and mics from a stage. This is one I've seen set up many times. It's just at least in the US, I'll speak for the US, this is a classic bar and restaurant setup. And so there's a lot to this, ultimate little analog zone mixer. Don't let its size throw you off. There's a lot to this. So I would love, I see I've got a message here so far that I'll go check. We got a Q&A for anybody who's curious or has some more questions. The good thing about the GR4 is that while there is so much power behind it, it should be easy to install, easy to use a program and get running quickly for any number of projects. All right, let's check out this Q&A. Do the PL14 remotes use PoE? That is an excellent question, Richard. I am not entirely sure if it's PoE proper. The PL14 remotes are not meant to go over a switch. So I would imagine that it is PoE through the GR4 itself when we use our that remote jack. I may go back to that particular slot there. Let's see if I can get to it. We'll get a bigger. There you go. Perfect. So that zone remote down here, that's what you connect your remotes to, your PL14s. Got another one. I'm getting some Teams messages as well. All righty. Any other questions, Q&A, anything like that?
Hey, Samantha.
Hello.
Thank you for the presentation. I've got a couple of questions coming in through our different channel.
Yeah,
if you don't mind. One is actually similar to what Richard has asked about the PL14, but someone is asking, can I control the unit over an Ethernet network? Do you want to take that one?
Sure. No, you cannot control it over an Ethernet network. If this is a very analog approach to the zone mixing. So this would be, again, like the remote controls are not meant to go over a network switch. They would be either daisied off of that PL remote jack on the back.
And another one, which I think you covered actually, but someone's saying I'm installing mono ceiling speakers only. So how do you go about setting your zone 1 and 2 output as mono instead of stereo?
Yeah, I think I did. Let me go try to find that slide here. Let's see here. There we go. It's via these jumpers. There we go. We can put a jumper in and we can basically make the zones 1 or zone 2 go into mono. Obviously, if there's not one there, it's defaulted to stereo. So.
Thank you for that. There's a question about rack mounting. That rack mounting rack keys are included in the box. So you can decide to use the rack keys and mount them in a standard 19-inch 1E rack space.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think that's probably how most people will put it up. It may be sitting someplace, but it being rack mountable is a must.
And I think, there's a last minute question coming in. How far away can you use the PL5 remote from the PL14?
That is an excellent question. Do you know that answer, Nick? Because I would assume normal cat lengths, but.
Yeah, well, the PL5, so the PL5 is the infrared remote.
Yes.
And honestly, I don't have the answer. Obviously you need line of sight for infrared.
Right.
I don't have a range. I can ask some of the engineers to see if I can find out any more spec and get back to you. But I would assume it's within a room installation or a small hall, nothing bigger than that.
I don't imagine 100 feet. It's probably less than that. I would imagine. Yeah. Any other questions? And if you can't think of a question right now, you guys, I've heard, I'm sure, of the booking the one-on-one session. You're free to fill that out. It will likely be me you hear from, but it might be Nick or somebody from your local distributor to answer those questions for you. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's also, again, just to echo what Samantha said, go on the website, register for other sessions. We have a full 3-day schedule of interesting topics, and you can indeed book a one-to-one meeting as well if you want to discuss any specific requirement.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you, Samantha, for the presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out. Always appreciate it.